Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine a place not found on any map. A lake, shimmering like spilled starlight, where the sky never becomes night, nor fully day. A place where time doesn't tick, but breathes. Where stars no longer fall, they rest. And where your footsteps are not meant to lead you somewhere, but to bring you gently back to yourself. This is not a story to rush through. It is a place to linger. A quiet journey of remembering, becoming, and simply being. Let your heart settle. Let the noise slip away. You have arrived beneath the lake of forgotten stars. There was a place no map remembered. A place folded softly into the crease between one sleepy dream and the next. Where stars once fell, not with fire, but with a sigh, like feathers adrift on warm evening wind. They rested where the sky touched the water, and where the water forgot how to ripple. This was the lake of forgotten stars. No one knew exactly when it came to be, or if it had always existed. The way quiet always exists in the pause between thoughts. The lake shimmered like spilled moonlight, still and soft and silver blue, surrounded by hills that hummed when the breeze passed through their tall grasses. The sky above it was always dusk, never quite night, never quite day, just an in-between, a gentle glow, a time when the world seemed to hold its breath in wonder. And far on the edge of this forgotten place, nestled in a little hollow where wildflowers never stopped blooming, lived a young dreamer named Caelin. Caelin was neither a boy nor a girl in the way that mattered to stories. They were simply Caelin, quiet-eyed, with hair like evening mist and a heart that listened more than it spoke. Caelin had always known there was something just beyond what the eye could see. Something soft and shimmering, like a memory that hadn't yet been made. Every night, they lay in the grass beside the lake, gazing at the stars floating beneath the surface, and wondered why the stars no longer danced in the sky like they did in old stories. Why did they fall? Why did they rest? Why did they forget? And most importantly, what would happen if one remembered? The lake whispered sometimes, not in words, but in feelings, in hushes, in echoes of lullabies no one taught but everyone somehow knew. One evening, as the twilight stretched long and blue across the hills, Caelin felt it, a pull, not urgent, not demanding, just a nudge, like a breeze that gently turned the page of a book you hadn't finished reading. A feeling that the lake had something to say, something to show, and for the first time, Caelin stood not beside the lake, but at its edge, toes just brushing the quiet water. The surface did not ripple, it only shimmered, as if it recognized them. And from beneath its mirrored stillness, a single star began to rise. It didn't sparkle or blaze. It simply rose like a memory from deep inside the chest, slow, warm, achingly familiar. Caelin reached out a hand, not touching the water, not yet. The star hovered just beneath the surface. And for a moment, everything around them held still, the grass, the wind, the distant rustle of nighttime creatures settling in. And then, very gently, the star blinked. Like it saw them, too. That night, Caelin dreamt not of stars, but of soft footsteps in the sky. In the morning, if one could call it morning in that endless dusk, Caelin woke with a word in their heart they hadn't known the day before. Remember. It wasn't a voice that said it, more like a gentle hum behind the ribs, a tugging at the corners of their thoughts. So Caelin followed it. They packed a small satchel, not because they knew where they were going, but because they understood that some journeys begin the moment you decide to take them. Inside the bag went a little wooden whistle, a gift from the wind, a dried petal from the moonflower that only bloomed once every year, and a tiny piece of sea glass that felt smooth and hopeful in the palm. Then Caelin stepped into the lake. There was no splash, no cold shock, no sinking, just a gentle folding, like sliding between two pages of a book you thought you'd finished. The water did not soak them. Instead, it cradled them, lifting gently, as if it remembered this shape, this dreamer, from long ago. And when Caelin opened their eyes, they were not under the lake. They were within it. It was a world unto itself, vast and glowing, filled with floating paths of light and slow-moving constellations that drifted like jellyfish across the ceiling of the world. Soft hills of clouds rolled beneath their feet, and above them, the stars that had once fallen now hummed gently in silver trees. It was quiet, but not empty. And from the far side of the glowing lake sky, something stirred. Not something frightening. No, not here. Just something, waiting. Caelin began to walk. They passed by fields of sleeping comets, curled like cats in sunbeams. They wandered through forests made of shimmerglass, where every leaf chimed with a forgotten name. Once, they paused to sip tea with a kindly old turtle who brewed dreams in a silver pot and had forgotten how long he'd lived here. Or perhaps, he said, I'm not forgetting, just remembering slower. In every step, Caelin felt the whisper grow stronger. Remember. But remember what? They began to ask. The cloud birds, drifting overhead, only cooed soft lullabies and offered feathers for the journey. The glimmerfish that swam in rivers of mist sang silent songs with their glowing fins. The wind, when it spoke, only asked questions back. Do you remember the last time you were still enough to listen? It whispered. Caelin began to wonder if remembering wasn't about finding something lost, but about hearing something that had always been there. Time passed, but not like it did in the waking world. There were no clocks in the lake of forgotten stars. Only moments, soft and rounded, like pebbles smoothed by centuries of tide. One such moment brought Caelin to a bridge made entirely of moonlight. It arched high over a canyon of sighs, where voices of the dreamers before echoed faintly. At the center of the bridge stood a figure. Not tall, not grand, just a presence. It wore robes woven from old lullabies and had eyes like the inside of a seashell, soft, spiraled, endlessly deep. You've come far, the figure said, voice like velvet dusk. I don't know where I'm going, Caelin admitted. Then you are closer than most. The figure smiled. Many seek to arrive, few remember to wander. Am I supposed to remember something? Caelin asked. The figure's gaze softened. You already are. And with that, the figure reached into the folds of its robe and pulled out a single, pulsing star. Not bright, not loud, just steady, quiet, familiar. Caelin reached for it, hand trembling. The moment their fingers brushed the light, a warmth bloomed in their chest. Not a memory, not a thought, but a feeling. The feeling of holding someone's hand without needing to speak. The feeling of being sung to as a child. The feeling of walking alone but not feeling lonely. It was kindness. It was connection. It was the knowledge that even if you are small, you are still part of something vast and beautiful. And that was enough. The journey did not end. Not exactly. Caelin walked on, but with lighter steps. The lake within the sky shifted gently around them, always unfolding, always offering, and in each dream place they visited, they left something behind, sometimes a feather, sometimes a song, sometimes only a soft breath of thanks. They did not rush, they did not search, they wandered, and everywhere they went, the stars beneath the lake began to shimmer a little more brightly. Not because they had been found, but because someone had remembered to see them. Long after, when Caelin finally returned to the shore from which they began, the lake was still, but not forgotten. Because now, whenever someone sat beside its waters and looked closely, not with their eyes, but with their quietness, they would feel it. That pull, that hum, that gentle, glowing truth. You are not lost, you are becoming. And as the wind curled softly through the grasses, Caelin smiled. They did not need to stay. The lake would always be there, waiting, whispering, welcoming, beneath the lake of forgotten stars. Caelin did not speak of their journey when they returned. Not out of secrecy, only because some things are too soft to be carried in words. They returned to their wildflower hollow by the lake, where the stars still shimmered just beneath the surface, and the dusk never faded. But now, the silence was richer, fuller, as though the world had taken a deep, contented breath. They began to notice the small things more. The way the grasses swayed like slow dancers to invisible music. The sound of the wind when it passed through the reeds at twilight. The gentle thrum of the earth beneath bare feet, like a lullaby only the souls could hear. And the lake, oh, the lake, whispered differently now. Not louder, not clearer, just closer. Sometimes, at dusk, Caelin would sit and hum the quiet song they had learned from the glimmerfish. And the stars below would tremble, ever so slightly, as if remembering. Too. One evening, while wandering along the curve of the lake's silver shore, Caelin met a creature they hadn't seen before. It was small, only the size of a curled-up kitten, but glowed with the gentle hue of candlelight behind frosted glass. It had long ears that drooped like willow leaves, and eyes the color of worn-in dreams. It looked up at Caelin, blinked once, then sat down without a word, as though it had been waiting. Caelin lowered themselves beside it. The creature didn't speak. It simply leaned gently against Caelin's side, warm and feather-light. "What are you?" Caelin asked softly, not expecting an answer. The creature gave the smallest hum, something between a sigh and a breeze, and nestled closer. "I think I'll call you Luma," Caelin said. Luma wiggled its ears in agreement. And from that moment on, Caelin was no longer alone in their wandering. Luma had a way of noticing what others didn't. It would pause at certain spots beside the lake, stare into the water for long, thoughtful moments, then hop on, as if remembering something Caelin had yet to understand. When Caelin followed its gaze, they sometimes saw shapes within the water, moments, dreams, echoes, a child running through a golden field, arms outstretched like wings, an old woman rocking slowly beneath a tree made of bells, a star learning to float again. Each vision shimmered like mist, then melted into the lake's soft glow, as though the water itself was made of memories no one else had room for. Caelin began to wonder, was the lake not just a place of forgotten stars, but a home for forgotten pieces of everyone? On a morning that felt more like a sigh than a beginning, Luma nudged Caelin toward a path they hadn't seen before. It wasn't made of earth or stone or light, but of soft thoughts, trails of gentle longing pressed into the dew. It curled between trees made of velvet and moss, where the air tasted like old lullabies and distant campfires. As they walked, the trees began to hum, not a song, but a feeling, the kind of hum you get when someone brushes your hair with care. Caelin closed their eyes and walked slower, letting the sound wrap around them like a quilt. At the center of the forest stood a pool, not a lake. Not quite, smaller, still, its surface rippled with color, though nothing touched it, and in the center of the pool floated a single flower, made of light. Luma approached it slowly and bowed. Caelin did the same. The flower pulsed once, then opened, not like a bloom unfolding, but like a door, and from within came a voice. Gentle, older than the hills, not male, not female, just kind. "You've come far, little light." Caelin bowed their head, unsure if they should speak. "You carry no sword," the voice continued, "no armor, no banner, only stillness, only wonder, and so you are welcome." "I don't know what I'm supposed to do," Caelin whispered. "You already are," the voice said, echoing the bridgekeeper's words from long ago. "But if you wish to see what lies further, you may enter." Caelin stepped into the pool. The world shifted, not suddenly, not sharply, like a curtain being drawn back to reveal a sky already waiting. They stood in a field of mirrors. Each mirror reflected not their face, but their selves, moments of feeling, of memory, of being. In one, Caelin was laughing, surrounded by faceless friends. In another, they were small, curled up under a thick quilt while stars danced on the ceiling. In yet another, they were weeping, not from sadness, but from beauty too large to hold. "This is who you've been," the voice said. "Is this who I am?" Caelin asked. "No," the voice said gently. "This is who you carry." Caelin reached out and touched one mirror. It shimmered like water and then folded into their palm, becoming a soft light that nestled in their chest. They touched another, and another. Each time, the memory became not a burden, but a balm, a softness, a wholeness. When they had gathered as many as they could hold, the mirrors faded, and the voice said one last thing. "You cannot become the stars you chase, but you can remember why they shine." Caelin awoke back at the lake's edge. Luma sat beside them, blinking slowly. The air was still dusk, but the shimmer on the water was brighter. Something had shifted, or perhaps, something had returned. Caelin breathed in the scent of lilacs, the warmth of stars. They smiled, and as they sat there, holding all they had gathered, not as possessions, but as pieces, they understood something soft and slow. The journey never ends, not in this world, not in the next, because the journey is not about reaching. It is about remembering to be gentle, to listen, to walk slowly and see deeply. To love quietly and fully. To be. And the lake, silent and silver, shimmered back. In the days that followed, not that days truly passed here, but only softened into one another like watercolor hues, Caelin began to share what they had found. Not in words, in being. They walked the paths around the lake more often. And where they passed, the flowers opened more readily. The wind became gentler. The stars beneath the water stirred like they were listening. Others began to come, not many, and never loudly. Just travelers, wanderers, dreamers. A girl who spoke in colors instead of words. A boy who had forgotten how to laugh and slowly relearned by watching the trees giggle. An old person whose age was not in numbers but in lullabies hummed under breath. They never asked for directions. They simply arrived, as if the lake had called them gently in their sleep, like it once had with Caelin. And Caelin welcomed them not as a guide, but as a friend, a fellow rememberer. Luma, always quiet and nearby, watched with slow, glowing eyes. Sometimes it would lead a newcomer down a mossy path or into a cave where the walls whispered stories only they could hear. Sometimes it simply sat beside them until their breathing matched the rhythm of the stars. The lake had become more than a place. It had become a home. Not the kind with roofs or rules, but the kind where your heart stops bracing. Where you can let out the breath you didn't know you'd been holding. Where you can simply exist. And that is enough. One day, or perhaps it was a moment longer than a day, Caelin found a door where no door had ever been. It stood in the middle of the field of hushgrass. Tall and wooden, carved with swirling patterns that shifted gently when you weren't looking at them directly. There was no wall, just the door, standing on its own, as if waiting. Luma sat at its base, ears low, blinking slowly. Caelin approached, curiosity blooming. The door did not open by force. There was no handle, no key, but as Caelin placed a palm gently against the cool wood, it sighed, not creaked, sighed, and slowly, gently, it opened inward. Beyond it lay a staircase made of soft clouds and sighs. It spiraled upward, endlessly slow, like time taking a nap. Caelin turned to Luma, who gave a quiet nod. So they climbed. The staircase did not lead to a tower, nor a mountain. It led to a moment. A vast space where stars floated freely, not trapped beneath water, not forgotten, just drifting, remembering themselves. At the center was a pool of starlight. Not deep, just enough to dip one's fingers into. And beside it stood a figure made of glow and gentleness. Its face was always turning, like a slow carousel of memories, soft and kind and familiar. "You've returned," it said, though Caelin did not remember having been here. "Have I?" Caelin asked. "In many ways," the figure replied. "We all return." Caelin looked into the pool and saw not their reflection, but moments of stillness. The first time they sat by the lake. The first time they listened without trying to understand. The first time they felt whole without needing to be more. "Is this where the stars go?" Caelin whispered. "No," the figure said. "This is where they begin." Caelin looked up, and indeed, one by one, stars were lifting from the pool, like lanterns rising in the slow breath of night. They didn't blaze. They didn't burn. They glowed with remembrance. Every kindness ever forgotten, the figure said, becomes a star. Even small ones? Especially small ones. Caelin dipped a finger into the pool. It was warm, not like fire, but like memory. Something shimmered into their palm. A single glowing thread. Soft, fragile, unbreakable. "What is it?" Caelin asked. "A thread from the heart of your stillness." The figure answered. "It's yours to keep, or to give." Caelin held it close. It pulsed once, gently. "I don't know what I'm meant to do with it." "You'll know," said the figure, "when someone forgets how to remember." Caelin descended the cloud stairs slowly, not because they feared the end, but because they had learned to move gently. Luma waited, blinking its soft eyes. Caelin held out the thread. Luma sniffed it once, then leaned into Caelin's hand. And as they walked back toward the lakeside together, the world felt even quieter than before. Not emptier, more full. That night, if night could be called such in the land where twilight cradled all things, Caelin sat by the lake, the thread of starlight still resting in their palm. And across the water, a small boat appeared. It was made of folded paper and gentle intentions. Inside it sat a child, wide-eyed and trembling slightly, though not from fear. Caelin stood, heart blooming quietly. The boat came ashore without a sound. The child stepped out, clutching something invisible but heavy. "I think I'm lost," the child said. "You're in the right place," Caelin replied, "but I don't know where I came from. You're here now, but I don't know who I am." Caelin knelt and placed the thread of starlight into the child's small hand. "You don't need to know yet," they said. "You only need to remember you are made of light." The child blinked, then smiled, then cried. The kind of cry that doesn't hurt, but softens. Luma curled beside them. The child sat between Caelin and the creature, and together, they watched the stars ripple beneath the lake. One star blinked softly, as if remembering itself. From that day on, Caelin understood. The lake did not need to be explored. It needed to be held, listened to, shared, and so they stayed, not as a keeper, not as a guardian, as a welcomer. Whenever someone arrived, be it by boat, by dream, by longing, Caelin was there. Sitting quietly, humming softly, hand open, offering not answers, only presence, and always, at their side, Luma watched with gentle, glowing eyes. The days, though no sun ever rose or set, seemed to stretch like long silk ribbons. Quiet and colorful, fading gently into one another. The lake remained unchanged and ever-changing, its surface still as thought, yet always whispering beneath. And more travelers came, not in crowds, never loudly, one at a time, always softly, always just as they were needed. There was an old man with trembling hands who came searching for a lullaby he'd once sung but could no longer remember. There was a dancer who had lost her rhythm to grief. She moved only in slow circles, as if circling a memory she couldn't name. There was a child who refused to speak, but carried a small pouch of tears they had never allowed to fall. Caelin welcomed them all, sometimes with a warm cup of dream-steeped tea, sometimes with a story from a place where clouds fell upward, sometimes with only silence, and somehow, that was enough. The lake knew each of them. It glowed differently with every soul who arrived. Its light shifted hue, not dramatically, not jarringly, but in the soft way that emotions ripple when you're quiet enough to feel them. Luma often led the newcomers to places they needed to visit. The meadow where lost laughter floated like pollen in the breeze. The tree with silver bark that whispered long-forgotten names when touched. The glade where music grew wild and untamed, blooming into melodies only heard by those who had forgotten how to sing. Each one found a piece of themselves beside the lake, not all at once, not completely, but enough. One dusk, or perhaps it was simply a moment heavier with hush, Caelin sat on a soft stone beneath the dreaming willow and watched a single leaf fall. The leaf spun, slowly, gently, and landed on the surface of the lake without a sound. It did not sink. It floated there, like a question not yet asked. And then, just beside the leaf, a shimmer. It was not a star. Not quite. More like a story. A memory, perhaps, or a wish long set aside. It rose slowly, pulsing faintly, like the beat of a distant heart. Caelin leaned forward, breath quiet, and the shimmer began to unfold. Not into words, not into images, into feeling. It was a story of a young girl who had once believed she could speak to the wind. Of how she would stand on grassy hills and sing to the breeze, certain that somewhere, the sky was listening. Of how she grew, and the wind stopped speaking. Of how, eventually, she stopped listening. The story settled into Caelin's chest like warm tea. It ached in the way only beautiful things can. And from the water, a voice rose, not spoken, but felt. "Will you remember her for me?" Caelin placed a hand over their heart. "I will." The shimmer pulsed once, and then gently folded back into the lake. Like a sigh returned to silence. That night, Caelin dreamt of wind chimes shaped like wings in meadows where children whispered secrets into dandelions. The kind of dream that doesn't fade with waking, but lingers like the scent of something beloved. When they opened their eyes, Luma was curled beside them, one ear twitching, as if it, too, had heard the wind. Caelin smiled and whispered, "She's still singing." Luma nuzzled their side in quiet agreement. As more stories began to rise from the lake, gentle, fragile things that shimmered just for a moment, Caelin understood more clearly. The lake did not only hold forgotten stars. It held forgotten selves. Versions of people long buried under noise and time and busyness. The soft parts. The parts that still listened to lullabies. The parts that believed in sky chatter and cloud conversations. And so, Caelin began a ritual. Each dusk, they would sit at the lake's edge, light a tiny lantern made from dew and spider silk, and whisper a story into it. Sometimes it was their own. Sometimes, one they had heard. Sometimes, one they simply felt. They would set the lantern adrift across the lake, and it would float, glowing gently, until the lake accepted it, and the stars beneath the surface would ripple, quietly, like they were nodding. One evening, a girl arrived in silence. Her eyes were wide with wonder and rimmed in tears that had never fallen. She carried nothing but a stone, smooth, round, heavy in the palm. Caelin met her without question. They sat together by the lake, the silence wrapping around them like a shawl. Finally, the girl spoke. "This stone is the last thing I have from my mother." Caelin nodded softly. "I've carried it for so long." The girl continued, voice like crumpled paper. "But I don't remember her face anymore. Only the weight of this." She opened her palm. The stone glowed faintly in the twilight. Caelin didn't ask her to let go. Didn't urge her to throw it into the lake. They simply took out their thread of starlight, the one given to them on the staircase of clouds, and wrapped it gently around the stone. The glow deepened, and the girl gasped, tears finally falling. For just a moment, she saw her mother's smile again, not clearly, not in detail, but in feeling, in warmth, in light. She held the stone to her heart and whispered, "I remember." The lake shimmered. A star beneath it blinked. That night, Caelin sat a little longer by the water. The moon, or whatever passed for moon in this place, hung low, soft, and kind. And Caelin thought about all the small things people forget. The sound of their own laugh. The way it feels to be held. The quiet joy of puddles. And shadows. And wind chimes. They closed their eyes. And whispered into the lake, "I'll remember them for you." The lake hummed. And somewhere far away, perhaps in the waking world, someone stirred in their sleep, suddenly feeling just a little less alone. The days unfolded like petals, each one quietly opening into the next. And the lake remained, ever still, ever knowing. Caelin began to notice something new. The stars beneath the surface, once scattered and faint, had grown brighter, not blazing, not overwhelming, just present, like fireflies on a still summer night, like promises not yet spoken, but deeply felt. They did not count them. They simply watched, and listened. It was never about how many stars had returned to the lake. It was about why they returned. Because someone had remembered. Because someone had listened. Had sat quietly beside sorrow. Had walked gently alongside wonder. One evening, as Caelin wandered further than usual, beyond the willow grove, past the meadow of murmurs, and into the quiet forest of velvet bark, they found a clearing filled with floating lanterns. Each one drifted lazily above the mossy ground, glowing faintly with a different color. And at the center sat a being. Neither young nor old, neither tall nor small, simply there. Its hair shimmered like moon-touched water, and its skin held the soft hue of things not yet spoken. It looked up as Caelin entered. "I've been waiting," it said, though its voice carried no urgency, only calm. "For me?" Caelin asked softly. "For anyone who saw." The being replied, "You are the first in a long time." Caelin sat across from it, the air around them so still it hummed. "What is this place?" they asked. "The garden of remembered feelings." Caelin looked around. The lanterns blinked slowly, like resting hearts. "Each light you see," the being continued, "is a feeling someone once had, but never gave a name. They live here now, until someone finds them again." Caelin stood, approached a nearby lantern glowing soft blue, and placed a hand beneath it. Immediately, their chest warmed, and in their mind bloomed a quiet moment. A child's hand brushing against theirs in passing, sticky with jam and curiosity. No words, no explanation, just a soft connection, a feeling never named. Caelin let out a breath, and the lantern pulsed once, then gently drifted upward and out of sight. "You remembered it," the being said. Caelin turned back, heart fuller than a moment before. "Can I?" Take some of these back with me? You may. The being nodded, but carry only what you can hold with kindness. So Caelin walked the clearing slowly, cupping each floating light, letting the feelings flow through them. Some made them smile, some made them ache, but all of them softened the space within their chest that had once felt too quiet. And when they had gathered enough, the being gave a small, knowing bow. Take them to the lake. It said, it is ready. When Caelin returned, the lake shimmered differently. It was no longer simply reflecting stars. It was stars. The surface was alive with them, tiny, pulsing, drifting like seeds on water. The wind carried their soft glow across the shore. The reeds swayed not just in rhythm, but in recognition. Caelin knelt beside the water and opened their hands. The unnamed feelings, the lights they had gathered, floated down onto the lake's surface like petals. And one by one, they sank gently in, not disappearing, but joining. The stars blinked brighter, and then something Caelin hadn't expected happened. The lake spoke, not in words, in memory. Caelin saw, not with their eyes, but from somewhere deeper, a woman sitting by the lake's edge, singing a lullaby to no one in particular. Her voice cracked, but she kept singing. A boy building a paper boat with trembling hands, setting it into the water, whispering a wish no one would ever hear. An elder stirring a cup of tea with eyes closed, remembering a name they no longer said aloud. All of them, all the ones who had come and gone. And the lake had held them all, had listened, had kept them. Caelin felt tears slip down their cheeks, not from sorrow, but from knowing, from belonging, from the understanding that this place, this lake, this twilight world, was made not of magic, but of memory kept gently enough to last. Luma padded up beside Caelin, blinking its gentle eyes. It nuzzled close and let out a small hum. Barely a sound, but filled with warmth. Caelin whispered, I think the lake remembers for everyone who forgets. Luma nodded, and the lake, in its way, nodded too. As time unfolded, softly, slowly, Caelin became something not quite the same as before. Not change, not transformed, just more true. They still wandered, still listened, still welcomed those who arrived with eyes full of wonder or weariness. But now, the stars in the lake greeted them, too, each one like a small voice whispering, you matter. You are remembered. And Caelin would whisper back, I see you. And in the quiet, the world became a little brighter. Caelin began to carry with them a gentle stillness. Not the kind that comes from silence, but the kind that settles in when nothing needs to be said. The kind that wraps around you like a soft blanket, like dusk on a windless evening. Everywhere they walked, the world greeted them like an old friend. The wind no longer whispered in questions, but in greetings. The grasses bowed not in fear, but in fondness. The stars beneath the lake shimmered not from loneliness, but from knowing. They knew now that Caelin would remember them. And remembering, in this world, was a kind of magic stronger than spells or potions. It was the magic of presence, of truly seeing. One morning, if such things could be called mornings in this twilight place, Caelin wandered back to the meadows of murmurs. There, they found the whisper ferns fully in bloom. Each tall, silvery stalk leaned toward them as they passed, their fronds humming with the soft voices of memory. Caelin paused by one that shimmered a little brighter than the rest. When they placed their hand on its stem, it spoke, not with words, but with feeling. A warm kitchen, the scent of cinnamon, the sound of a spoon tapping gently on porcelain. A small laugh, a hand brushing flour from a cheek. It was a memory from someone Caelin had never met. And yet, it filled them with an ache so soft it felt like home. They stayed for a while, sitting among the ferns, eyes closed, heart open. Luma curled beside them, purring gently, content to simply be. Over time, others came, not many, but enough. Some wandered in like Caelin had, quiet and unsure. Others stumbled, surprised to find such a place even existed. And Caelin welcomed them with a nod, sometimes with tea, sometimes with silence, always with warmth. They didn't need to explain anything. The world did the explaining for them. The lake shimmered gently, the forest offered soft paths. The lanterns of feeling still drifted in the garden. And each visitor brought a piece of themselves, left it behind in a sigh. A tear, a smile, a song, and in doing so, became part of the place. The stars beneath the lake grew fuller. Not brighter, just richer, like a song sung by more voices. Like a story whispered in more tongues. Like a dream shared by those who dared to believe in gentleness. One evening, Caelin sat by the lake, toes just brushing the water's edge. The stars rippled gently underfoot. "I used to think I was lost," they said softly to no one in particular. Luma, nestled on their lap, blinked slowly. "I thought I needed to find something big, something important, like a purpose, or a reason." The lake responded with a ripple so soft it barely moved the reeds. "But I think maybe I just needed to stop rushing, to sit still long enough for the world to find me." A gentle breeze passed through, carrying with it the scent of lilac and something older, something like memory. And in that moment, Caelin knew they weren't lost. They never had been. They had simply been becoming. There was no grand ending, no sudden burst of revelation or glowing doors to walk through. Just the quiet unfolding of a truth that had always been there. That peace does not come from answers. It comes from presence, from noticing, from remembering. And beneath the lake of forgotten stars, those who remembered had found a home. Not a place made of stone or maps, but a place made of gentleness, of connection, of stories held like breath. So if you ever find yourself standing beneath a sky that looks more like a reflection than a beginning, if you ever hear water speaking softly in the language of stars, if you ever feel the tug of something familiar in a place you've never been, you may have found your way there, too. And Caelin will be waiting. Not to explain, not to lead, just to sit beside you, and remember with you. The days, if they could be called that, began to flow not in hours or moments, but in feelings. Time in the land beneath the lake was measured in the scent of blooming cloud fruits, in the hush of the wind over mossy hills, in the way the sky sometimes turned lavender without warning. And in the heart of it all, Caelin continued to wander, not to chase, but to greet. They wandered not for answers, but for companionship with the unknown. In the soft glades beyond the velvet cliffs, they found sleeping flowers that hummed lullabies to themselves, cradling dew like dreams. In the mirror orchard, they saw trees with bark that shimmered like moonlit glass, each one reflecting not a face, but a feeling. When Caelin stood near one, it showed not their appearance, but their gentleness, their wonder, their quiet grief. One tree shimmered with a flickering light, like the shy glow of someone beginning to forgive themselves. Caelin placed a hand on it and whispered, "I see you." And for a moment, the leaves sang. Luma had grown larger, or perhaps simply fuller, in presence, still cat-like, still round and soft and silver pod, but now with eyes that seemed to carry galaxies too. She often guided Caelin toward places that felt important, even if they couldn't explain why. One such day, she led them through a grove of blue lantern fungi, past a hill where the sky curved downward like the edge of a dream, to a quiet pool of water nestled in moss. There was no breeze, no sound, no shimmer of stars, just stillness. And in that stillness, Caelin felt something stir, not around them, but within them, a memory they hadn't remembered, a name they'd forgotten how to hold, a self they hadn't yet become. The pool was called the Listening Well. Here, the world didn't speak. You did, without words, without voices, but through the hush that sat between heartbeats. Caelin sat beside it for a long time. They didn't try to think. They didn't try to search. They simply listened, and the pool listened back. That night, they dreamed of starlight sinking like petals into the earth, of voices singing lullabies in a language older than sound, of hands not reaching to pull or hold, but simply to touch, to be near. And when they woke, something had softened, something that had once been tight around their chest, around their thoughts. It had loosened, like a knot finally undone, not with force, but with patience. Not all who came to this world stayed forever. Some stayed for a little while, until they remembered something they'd lost. A piece of courage, a laugh, the way it felt to belong to themselves. And then they would leave, not through a door or a goodbye, but by slowly becoming light. They'd shimmer gently, like fog at dawn, and then be gone, not vanished, not erased, but carried, like starlight on the wind. Caelin always watched them go with a small smile and a full heart. Not sadness, just a knowing that they would remember. And that was enough. One evening, as Caelin was walking through the Rainbow Valley, a place where raindrops hung suspended in the air, chiming softly like wind chimes, they met a child. The child had a crown of cloud moss and eyes like soft ink. She was sitting on a stone, watching a droplet hover before her. "I don't know who I am," she said simply. Caelin sat beside her. "You don't have to," they said. The child looked at them. "But everyone else seems to." Caelin shook their head gently. "No one really does. Some are just better at pretending." The child smiled faintly. "Do you pretend?" "I used to," Caelin replied. "But I think now, I just wonder. And wandering while wondering feels softer than pretending." The child nodded as if that made sense. She stood up, reached for Caelin's hand, and together, they walked among the chimes. Not to find answers, just to feel the music. There was a tree that bloomed only when no one looked at it. Caelin called it the shy tree. They'd heard whispers about it from a passing breeze, followed a trail of glowing pebble thoughts, and waited with their back turned, trusting it to bloom in its own time. And when they peeked, just once, over their shoulder, they saw petals scattered on the ground like moonlight tears. The tree had bloomed for them, not because it needed to be seen, but because it had felt seen. And perhaps, Caelin thought, that's all anyone really wants. In the distance, the lake still shimmered. The stars beneath it pulsed gently, each one a memory, a moment, a breath that had not been forgotten. Caelin returned often, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. They would sit on the little dock, legs dangling above the surface, watching the gentle dance of light and quiet. And sometimes, just sometimes, they would see a new star flicker into being. Born not from sorrow, not from loss, but from presence. A moment held, a kindness given, a silence shared, and Caelin would smile, because the lake remembered, and so did they. There was, deep within the inner groves of the dreaming forest, a path that only appeared when one walked without asking where it led. Caelin found it one morning, or was it evening? It didn't matter much. The light was soft, golden as candle wax, and the air smelled faintly of quiet poems left unread. They followed the path without a plan. It curled gently through wildflower clouds, across stone bridges that whispered riddles, and past creatures made of moss and music. None of them spoke, and none of them needed to, because presence, here, was louder than words. Eventually, the path led to a field of paper lantern trees. Their trunks were slender and pale, and from each one dangled glowing paper notes, each softly swaying, each humming faintly, like forgotten lullabies. Caelin reached out and touched one gently. A whisper filled their heart, not a voice in their ears, but a memory placed gently in their chest, like a friend handing them a small folded letter. It was a memory of someone who had once sat by a window, tracing raindrops on the glass, humming a tune only their heart remembered. Caelin smiled. The lantern trees didn't store memories the way minds did. They held them, cradled them, gently, without asking them to explain themselves. The field stretched far, but Caelin didn't hurry. They paused at each tree, letting each note offer its quiet treasure. Some held laughter, some held stillness. One held the soft sound of someone being brave without saying a word. As they rested beneath one of the trees, Luma curled up beside them, her purring deep and rhythmic, like waves against a memory. A soft voice drifted in, not from a person, but from the wind that moved through the lanterns. "Thank you for remembering," it said. Caelin didn't know who had said it, or to whom it was meant, but they whispered back, "Always," because here, nothing was forgotten, just softly waiting to be felt again. In time, Caelin arrived at the edge of the Cloudstep Cliffs, a place where stepping forward did not mean falling, but floating. The mist curled beneath them, forming soft stairways that shifted like feathers in slow motion. They stepped forward, trusting not the path, but their own gentleness. Each step was a pause, a breath, a letting go, and slowly, the air around them began to glow. Shapes formed in the mist, not of people, but of feelings. A shape of safety, of longing held with care, of dreams wrapped in velvet and kindness. Caelin realized they weren't alone, not truly. They never had been. The mist was full of quiet companions, memories, perhaps, or pieces of people who had left love behind like footprints in sand. Each one hummed gently, and Caelin walked among them. Not disturbing, not claiming, just being. Beyond the cliffs, past the glimmering stairways of fog, Caelin found the whispering hollow. It was said, though no one had ever said it aloud, that this was where the stars came to rest when they were tired. Not dead, not fallen, just resting. Tiny flickers of silver and pale blue floated among the grasses, blinking softly like they were half asleep. Caelin knelt and held out a hand. One little light drifted down, nestled in their palm, and pulsed gently, no brighter than a sigh, no heavier than a secret. And in that moment, Caelin felt its story, not in thoughts, but in knowing. This star had once been a wish. Not a desperate cry, not a loud dream, but a small hope whispered into the wind on a quiet night, by someone who just needed to feel seen. And here it was, still glowing, still holding that hope, still listening. Caelin smiled and closed their hand gently, as if to say, your wish was not lost. It simply wandered. That night, as they rested under a tree that breathed in time with the moon, Caelin spoke to Luma. Do you think, they began softly, that the stars forget us? Or we forget them? Luma stretched, blinked slowly, and placed her paw over Caelin's chest. Then she purred, and Caelin understood. Neither forgot, they just waited, until we were ready to remember. As time passed, or as stillness grew, Caelin noticed that the stars beneath the lake had begun to respond. When they walked near the water, it shimmered gently, like it recognized them, reflected not their face, but the shape of their journey. Not what they looked like, but what they had become. More patient, more present, more kind, not because they had solved a mystery or climbed a mountain, but because they had learned how to see, to feel, to be with what was soft, and quiet, and unseen. They returned one final time to the dock on the lake's edge. Luma beside them, the water still and full of memory. Caelin sat, feet bare, touching the surface, watching it ripple. In its depths, they saw moments, small, unremarkable, but beautiful. Their first smile here, the lantern trees, the girl in Rainbell Valley, the soft purr of Luma at their side. And they knew, without question, this world was not about escape. It was about return. Return to self. Return to gentleness. Return to what was always there, waiting. Caelin leaned back, arms behind their head, and closed their eyes. They didn't need to ask what came next. The stars would remember, and that was enough. There was a day in the lake's world when the sky forgot to wear blue. Instead, it slipped on a robe of lavender mist, gentle and soft as breath on glass. The clouds were long, drifting like old letters unopened, and the air smelled faintly of dreams that had taken too long to bloom. Caelin wandered through this light like it was a memory they hadn't lived yet. And maybe it was. Here, time didn't move forward, it floated, and Caelin floated with it. Beyond the willow groves, where the ground dipped into a cradle of moss and glowbugs, there stood a house, or rather, a home. It didn't belong to anyone, but it welcomed everyone. Its windows always fogged from tea steam. Its door always slightly open, like it was expecting someone. When Caelin stepped inside, they were greeted by the scent of books with soft spines and soup left warm on the stove just in case. No one lived there, and yet, everything was alive. The fireplace hummed in a low voice. The rocking chair moved gently, though there was no breeze. On the table sat a journal, its pages filled in careful, looping handwriting. If you find this, you are safe. If you stay, you are healing. If you leave, you will carry gentleness with you. Caelin didn't write anything. They just read the lines again, and again, until the words didn't need to be read anymore, only remembered. That night, Caelin slept by the hearth. Luma curled beside them like a comma in the middle of a long, slow sentence. The flames in the fireplace whispered lullabies that had no lyrics, just warmth. And Caelin dreamed not of places, but of feelings, of forgiveness without apology, of peace without reason, of stillness that did not ask anything but presence. When they woke, it was raining, but not water. It rained light, Tiny silver threads fell from the sky, brushing leaves, skin, and memory. Luma batted one playfully, and it glowed where her paw touched. Caelin stepped outside and raised their hands to the sky. Each thread of light that touched them left a feeling, a soft tug of memory or wonder. One thread made them laugh and not know why. Another made their chest swell with a sudden, full silence. And then, one landed softly on their shoulder and stayed. It didn't dissolve, didn't melt. It remained, a single thread of light, connecting them gently to something just out of reach. They left it there, not to chase, not to understand, but to honor. That day, Caelin found a river with no source. It simply began, quietly, flowing in a direction no one had ever followed. They walked beside it, listening. The river didn't rush, it remembered. It carried tiny boats made of folded wishes and petals. Each boat hummed softly with intent, some full of yearning, some of gratitude, some that asked nothing at all. One boat bumped gently into Caelin's foot, and they picked it up. Inside was a single seed, glowing pale gold. They didn't plant it, they simply carried it with care, like it might bloom when it was ready. Or never, and that was okay. Not all seeds become trees. Some become quiet courage. Further along the shore, they met an old man whose beard was braided with feathers and starlight. He didn't introduce himself. He only offered a chair and a slice of pear soaked in honey and thyme. Together they sat, watching the river drift by, saying nothing. After a while, the old man spoke. Some places live inside us long after we leave, he said. Caelin nodded. And some people, too. The man smiled, but not at them. At the memory that had come to sit beside him. You'll know when it's time to go, he said, not because the road calls, but because the silence no longer asks you to stay. That evening, under the soft lull of dusk-colored sky, Caelin returned to the lake. It greeted them like an old friend who had been waiting, not with impatience, but with gentle delight. They sat by the shore, pulling their knees to their chest, the seed still glowing faintly in their hand. Luma purred beside them. The lake shimmered, and then, slowly, carefully, it spoke, not with words, but with reflection. The water held their image, not as they were, but as they had become. Softer, more spacious inside, able to hold wonder without needing it to explain itself. Caelin smiled. They leaned forward and placed the glowing seed on the surface of the lake. It floated, then sank, slowly, as if the water were tucking it in. And from beneath the ripples, a light rose, not bright, just steady. It flickered once, then pulsed, then remained. That night, as stars blinked lazily overhead, Caelin whispered, "I will carry you with me." The lake didn't answer. It didn't need to. Its silence had already said everything. And Caelin understood. They had not come here to find answers. They had come here to remember. And they would return to the waking world not with knowledge, but with gentleness. Caelin didn't stay at the lake forever. But they didn't leave it either. Because some places live inside you once you've listened closely enough. The days moved like soft waves, no longer counted in numbers, but in sensations. The rustle of Luma's fur as she nestled beside them. The warmth of moss under their cheek during afternoon naps. The taste of wild honey on cloud-covered mornings. Life became less about direction, and more about depth, about noticing, about being noticed by the quiet things. And one day, without deciding, Caelin stood by the edge of the lake and felt something shift, not outside, but within. It was a readiness, not for departure, but for movement. They didn't say goodbye to the lake. They didn't need to. They simply looked back once, placed a small smooth stone on the path, like a breadcrumb for the next gentle wanderer, and walked. Through forests that whispered, through fields that hummed lullabies only dusk could hear. They walked slowly, unhurried, each step not toward something, but with something. A stillness that had become a friend. A softness that no longer needed explanation. Luma trotted beside them, pausing now and then to look at Caelin as if to say, "Yes, this is right." In time, they came to other lakes, other skies, other quiet corners of the world. They sat with strangers who didn't need words. They traded stories for silences. They rested often, because rest was no longer something they earned. It was something they honored. And at night, When they closed their eyes beneath open skies, whether under trees or beside fireflies, Caelin could feel it still. The lake of forgotten stars. Not as a memory, but as a part of them. A still, glowing place that would always answer whenever their heart whispered, "Am I still becoming?" And the answer would shimmer gently. Always the same. Yes, love and becoming is not a race. It's a rhythm, one you already know. And so, Caelin slept, as the stars blinked above, and the world turned slowly, quietly, softly, as if not to wake them,